Welcome to the Backs to the Wall podcast. Four mates talking all things football with some special guests and other sporting shenanigans thrown in as well. So plenty to talk about this week on the Backs to the Wall podcast. It's been a crazy few weeks of football. In fact, we've had all of the controversy over handball, VAR. We had that crazy weekend as well with Liverpool getting beaten 7-2 and Man United got a hammering off Spurs as well. And we've had the international football as well. It was a pretty decent week all in all, you'd have to say, for the home nations. A couple of decent results. Of course, England got the better of Belgium on Sunday, and especially for Northern Ireland and Scotland. Northern Ireland beat Bosnia away from home on penalties, and Scotland also went through on penalties as well, didn't they, Jamie?
Yeah, after one of the worst games of football that I've seen Scotland play, and that's saying something, because we've not been a great footballing nation since 1998, really. But yeah, it was good to at least grind out the result, and we won 5-3 on penalties. So you have to give credit to Steve Clarke and his boys for just getting it over the line. I mean, it's not the prettiest of football that he's playing, but it seems to be a sort of a working formula. I mean, I think that's 6 or 7 now we've gone unbeaten, and I mean, some of the teams that we've beaten haven't been the most prestigious, but at the same time, you have to beat what's in front of you, sort of Israel, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and we've done relatively well, and we seem to have stopped the sort of rot at the back that sort of was crippling us before. We're doing a bit better there. So yeah, it was a good weekend, and last week was good as well.
And Serbia, isn't it?
It's on to Serbia. It'll be a real challenge, because I actually thought Norway would go through, especially with how well Haaland has been playing. But obviously Serbia beat them, was it 2-1, I think. So it'll be interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do get beat about 3-0. But with the way Steve Clarke's been playing, we seem to be a bit more organised now, and although, as I said before, it's really not pretty, and it seems to be like we just lump the ball up to either McBurney or Lyndon Dykes, it's working. Maybe we could scrape a 1-0 victory. I mean, you've got our sort of flair players like Robertson and John McGinn and Fraser as well, who've been playing pretty well for us, and it's not out of the question that we could go and pull off a result against Serbia, but it'll take a sort of a monumental performance from the boys to take us over that line, and I'm not going into expecting to beat them, but at least it's given us a little bit of hope.
Well, I did tune into some of that game against Israel, and it wasn't a game full of attacking quality, let's put it that way. It wasn't an end-to-end game. It was very cagey, which you kind of suppose what you'd expect. There's kind of a lot on the line, but...
Can you tell me how many shots Scotland had on target in 120 minutes?
I don't think... Did you have one?
No, out of 17 shots, there was none. And it actually took us about 60 minutes in the next game to get a shot on target. So we literally played, about 180 minutes of football without having a shot on target, which isn't great, and it needs to improve.
That's kind of what you expect with that kind of formation. I mean, I'll draw back to Sunderland. That's kind of a similar formation as to what we played. We just grind out results. It's kind of boring to watch, but it can be effective. But when you're kind of playing against sides similar to yourself, it's kind of hard to attack and break down teams when you're playing the five at the back. Sometimes we don't have as many flair or creative outlets, which evidently Scotland and probably Sunderland share a similar asset in that way.
My heart has been in my mouth recently when I've seen the starting lineup, and about half of Scotland's back line are play for Motherwell, O'Donnell and Gallagher. So they're not doing great. They're not doing too well at the minute in the SPL. So I was a bit worried, but seeing, in fairness to them, I really like O'Donnell, because obviously he used to play for Partick Thistle, but I've been a bit sceptical whether or not he's actually quite good enough to play in the international scene. But he really proved me wrong the other night. The game against Slovakia, that was his best game. It was a sensational ball, and he had to set up Dykes for that goal. So he's been certainly improving, and despite having maybe some new faces in defence and ones that you maybe wouldn't expect to be seeing playing, they're actually doing quite well together. I know I'm going off on a wee bit of a tangent here, but Andy Considine, he's at 33 now, plays centre-back for Aberdeen, and he's played something like 450 games for them. Just a one-man, one-club sort of guy, and he's just sort of done his trade in the Scottish football, and he's just kept his head down, and suddenly he gets the call up, and I'm sure he's absolutely delighted, and he kept a clean sheet, played the full 90 minutes. It's just a great story to see someone who's played most of their career, you'd say, and maybe you thought the chance was gone once you get past age of 30 if you've not been called up before. But I really like how Clark has given him that chance. And he did do an interview beforehand, Clark, and he said that Considine's usually Mr. sort of 7 out of 10. He gives you that. He doesn't do much wrong. He doesn't do a tremendous amount of great stuff, but he's a guy that you know is going to give you a reasonable performance. And sometimes you just need a bit of that when you're going to go up against teams who are similar level to you. And yeah, he did well.
One thing that actually did make me laugh whilst watching Scotland against Israel, that was the only game I was seeing, was seeing the once famously quoted saying that he was the best coach in the Premier League now on Scotland's coaching staff. Do you know who that is? It's John Carver, the former Newcastle caretaker. And I was actually very shocked to see that he was there. But I think Steve Clarke has Newcastle connections, which is probably why he is there.
Would you rate him as one of the better managers when he was in the Premier League, Andrew?
He didn't do very well with Newcastle, but he might be a good coach. He actually, funnily enough, came down and coached the local team in Sears for a little bit. That's a nice little fact.
I've just pulled up his Wikipedia here just to see a bit more about him, and he's been caretaker manager of Newcastle on a number of occasions, 3 it says here, as well as Leeds. So people must fancy him to come in and steady the ship for a bit and then get the man they really want in. So yeah, it's an interesting CV anyway.
Did he steady the ship in sea houses, Andrew?
He was just there for a little bit. Well, it was when Lee Clark was there, and I think, do you remember when we bumped into Lee Clark and sea houses, Michael?
Lee Clark in the pub, yeah?
Yes. He was quite drunk.
Yeah, I think the thing about the international football for me, and I don't know, obviously you want to watch your home nation play, but some of the matches have just been so dull. I watched the Republic of Ireland Slovakia match the other night, and it was just awful to watch. The worst thing about the game was that it had to go to extra time, and in fact then penalty, so one of the teams had to win. It just should have finished at 90 minutes. It was dreadful. The good thing about that, of course, though, is that Northern Ireland now play Slovakia in the playoffs final at Windsor Park and have every chance of beating them, because they were terrible.
What would it be like if the Republic of Ireland had beaten them and set up a tie against Northern Ireland? What's the general feeling, do you think, at the minute? Would that bring up old tensions? Would it be a pretty sort of dull affair, do you think? Or
I mean, I don't think it would be a great football match, if I'm honest, just looking at the two sides. But yeah, I think like years gone by, the Republic were always seen as the better footballing side than we were. They tended to have, they did have a couple of like really standout players, like you think of Robbie Keane and Damien Duff even. But now, like, if you got the Republic, you'd fancy yourself beating them, really. You know, they've only scored 1 goal in 4 matches, I think, and their recent form's really poor. They weren't great against Slovakia. Arguably should have beaten Slovakia, to be honest. But no, I think most of my friends probably wanted, were rooting for the Republic to win that game. And even then, if we had got them in the playoff final, you would have fancied your chances. Like, give yourself every opportunity to beat them. But yeah, like I say, that Slovakia team, and that has to give Northern Ireland confidence. They were poor against Austria on Sunday night, but I suppose bear in mind they had played 120 minutes in Sarajevo last week. So no, it'll be interesting. And yeah, overall, I have to say, good weekend for the home side. England beating Belgium yesterday. I watched the first half an hour of that match, and I thought Belgium were going to be 3 or 4 up. But yeah, all credit to the England team. Did you watch the game, Andrew?
I didn't actually. Around that time, my Sunday dinner was actually being prepared, so I had to go and sit at the table and didn't have my dinner. So I missed the entirety of the game. But no, I was pleasantly surprised to see his win. There's been quite a lot of, I wouldn't say criticism over Southgate in the past few games, but I think people are starting to say he's played a bit of negative football. So it's quite good to see he's beat Wales 3-0 and then a good side like Belgium 2-1.
Yeah, I watched the first 45 minutes of the Belgium-England game, and I thought it should have been about 3-0 at half-time. Belgium missed a couple of really good chances. They had that offside goal as well ruled out, probably quite rightly so. And they obviously had the penalty scored by Lukaku, but Aye, that big Lukaku up front was causing all sorts of problems. And then, like yourself, at half time, I decided I went and did something else, and I came back for the last 10, 15 minutes, and it was 2-1, and I couldn't believe it. But I think it's great to see younger players like Mason Mount. He's confident, got a bit of flair about him, drives the ball forward. You get Jack Grealish, who's been really, really good the last couple of seasons. I really like watching him. So I think if he's keep Southgate and just trust him a bit longer, and you've got these young boys coming through who seem to be like really good talents. You got Calvert-Lewin, people like that. Then you've got something really good to build on, and you've just beaten the top ranked nation in the world. So it pains me probably to say that England are doing really well, but no, you are, and it's testament to the boys.
I think it's kind of refreshing from an English point of view, seeing Southgate not solely pick on reputation like we have done so much in the past. Like he isn't afraid to pick like young players who haven't played before and pick a young side, because we do have some quite good young players development. I mean, I know there was a big hoo-ha before the international break of him not picking Grealish and dropping him for that game against Belgium, but then Mason Mount came in and scored. So it's whether or not we can do it in tournament level, which is the
Well, funnily enough, Kevin De Bruyne seems to think England will. He was out a few days ago saying they have the potential for major titles, and yeah, I mean, to be fair, England, well, they made the World Cup semis. When was that? 2 years ago?
2018 summer.
Yeah, 2 years ago. So,
Mikey, you had quite an interesting celebration during that England game against, was it Croatia?
Yeah, well, I mean, naturally, like anyone from the United Kingdom, I would support Northern Ireland, obviously, first, then Scotland, England, Wales, if they were playing another national side. And we were watching that England-Croatia semi-final. I can't really remember the details of the match, but all I do remember is that when Croatia scored, I was watching this match in a pub in Jamie's hometown of Oban. Croatia scored, and Jamie just, if anyone's ever seen him watching a football match or celebrating, you'll be able to understand this. He was jumping up and down, flinging his pint. He must have thrown an entire pint all over me, just in the moment of pure joy, the fact that England had conceded in a World Cup semi-final. And that really sums him up, to be honest. I, of course, was willing them on.
It was a general feeling in the pub, and I was pushed. And that's when the pint came out my hand.
But yeah, but if anyone knows Jimmy, they will not be surprised that even if he was pushed, the pint has managed to go all over me. Yeah, but
I do remember that. Similar story happened to me. I was watching it in my hometown with a few of my friends, and one of them arrived late. He actually arrived at the exact same time Croatia scored their equaliser. So we all jokingly said, "Oh, come on, it's your fault they scored," and that. Then he went in extra time. Did they score in extra time?
I can't remember. It finished 2-1, didn't it?
Yeah, it finished 2-1. Well, anyway, the build-up to their second goal, he went down to get himself a pint, and again, the exact same moment, he sat down. They scored their second goal. So one of our other friends behind him, I don't know what he was thinking, just went, "Oh, for fuck's sake, man," and just chucked his pint all over this guy. And we were just in like amazement as to what's just happened. The guy just picked up his pint, chucked it over him, then picked up the bar stool and was going to hit him over it. And someone had to pull the stool off for him and go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa."
It sounds like a standard reaction.
It was an interesting night and quite an incredible hangover the next day after that game. I suppose another thing when it comes to international football that I'd like to know is kind of your thoughts and kind of feelings going into the international break. Because for me, it's always kind of negative going into the international break because I don't really like going away from Sunderland games. And it's even more frustrating now that our games are still getting bloody cancelled for the international break when we're in League One, because we have 3 internationals still, 2 of them that don't even get in the Northern Ireland first team but are still in the squad, and then one of them was away with Kosovo, who's just got injured this time. But I don't know, I'd much rather watch someone play every week, and I don't really get the same buzz that you two might get whilst watching your nations.
I mean, I kind of get what you mean, especially when Partick Thistle were in the SPL, and it was annoying, especially if you're on a bad run of form, and then you lose that game, and then you realise, oh, for God's sake, we've got 2 weeks to wait now to try and rectify this because you've got an international break. But at the same time, the day before and the day of an international, you always get that same buzz, and it's annoying because being a Scotland fan, Scotland supporter, it's hell. It's hell to watch, and they let you down far more often than they bring you up. So it's just sort of that. It's just sort of weird. Like when it's coming up to game time, you just know that it's going to not be a spectacle by any means, but you still get there in front of your TV, or if you can go to the game, and you still go and cheer them on. But it's usually the same thing every time the international break comes around. But I don't know how you feel about it, Mike.
I think it's probably different for Jamie and I compared to you, Andrew, just in the sense of levels of expectations. You know, Northern Ireland traditionally, okay, we've had our heydays, you know, but in terms of recently, and I mean like the last 20 years, there hadn't been much to kind of celebrate, and then there've just been moments where Northern Ireland, the football team, have just gone above what anyone could ever really, you know, for a country that size. And everyone remembers where they were whenever Northern Ireland, you know, beat England 1-0 at Windsor Park, or whenever David Healy scored a hat-trick against Spain. Like, and then when they went to the Euros in France and they more than held their own, you know, like it was. So I think with Northern Ireland now, it'll be an interesting few years, because obviously Michael O'Neill's gone, and you know, it's hard to know what's going to happen. Like, you know, it's going to be that kind of rebuilding probably, as those players in 2016 are kind of getting on a bit. But I think it's more like, I mean, I don't necessarily enjoy watching Northern Ireland. I feel sick watching them. You know, you just get that nerves, especially because they always seem to be involved in those games, playoffs for things, you know, penalty shootout against Bosnia, and Peacock Farrell steps up, makes a save, they hit the bar, and then Liam Boyce fires in the winner. Like, you know, and of course there'll be a big game now against Slovakia at Windsor Park. Unfortunately, I don't think there will be any fans. Maybe is it 500 or something you're allowed. So I think it's different, and it's different purely because your expectations are lower. But Northern Ireland have kind of always managed to exceed what they should be doing. You know, they shouldn't really have been going to the Euros 2016 and beating Ukraine and holding Germany to, you know, they only got beat 1-0 off Germany, like, and they definitely give their fans, you know, something to cheer about.
It's a good point you make there, Michael, about sort of being a sort of smaller nation and you're sort of punching above your weight and you have those memories. But 1998, over 20 years ago, was Scotland's last major competition. So, I mean, the only thing in my head that Scotland fans can cling to that are sort of my age and younger really is the 2 wins against France, and when they were one of the best teams in the world. And that's what, going back to 2006, 7, so 13 years, 14 years, going back that far, and we didn't even qualify that time around. So, and I remember also the goals against England, the Griffiths free kicks. You just remember where you were, and these little moments just give you that little bit more hope, but you don't have quite the same journey as I suppose England fans do. But the thing I want to ask you about, Andrew, is going into international competitions. It seems to be what annoys me most about England is the press and the sort of past players and stuff that just seem to big up the England national team, that think they're going to do so well and praise them so much, and then when they come crashing down, it's it acts like it's a surprise. But if they just went into a competition with lower expectations, then they might have a bit of that pressure off, and they might be able to do a bit better. I don't know what your sort of thoughts are on the influence by the media.
I don't know. I mean, I can kind of understand where they're coming from, because it's almost that job to hype it up a bit, and it makes better publicity kind of saying England are going to win than they're going to do shit. But it again would probably be a similar thing. I mean, I don't know what it was like. I'm assuming the media in Northern Ireland was hyping your team up when you were in the Euros. I think it's just leading into a competition, kind of anything can happen at that stage. And that's kind of when I would say most England fans get excited, because we know, well, I say we know we're going to bloody qualify in qualifying. We should do, and that's our minimum expectation, pissing the qualifying group. And then the only time where we're kind of concerned or worried about games is going into the actual competition, because that's when it's on the line. That's when we don't know what's going to happen. That's when we're not really expected to win. I can kind of understand why it gets annoying, but then I suppose, does every major competition not big up the home team when the media's in town?
I think as well, though, like, I mean, England do, traditionally have had good football teams. Maybe they have got ahead of themselves slightly. Like, they're not Germany, they're not Spain, they're not, France, whatever. But like, they've had good teams, and I think probably what's different with Northern Ireland is we haven't been used to that consistently making major sort of competitions. Even at the Euros in 2016, the slogan was Dare to Dream for Northern Ireland, because it was kind of like, we'll go here and just the Northern Irish fans wouldn't have cared if they got beat 6-0 every match. It was like, oh my God, we are at a major finals of a tournament, So I guess it is expectations, and I think the difference with England is that they have their teams made up of Premier League footballers. It might have been you, Andrew, that someone or Jamie possibly mentioned Jack Grealish, which I suppose leads us on in some way as a segue to what happened between Aston Villa and Liverpool. What would that be now? 2 weeks ago? And in fact, just a weekend of madness. And you know what? It's been several weekends of madness in the Premier League. I mean, when you think about the goals that have been scored, has there still been a hat trick every game week or something ridiculous so, like that? But I think if we take that Aston Villa Liverpool match, first of all, I don't know if you both watched it. I didn't. I wasn't in the house when the match was on, and came back. I think it was one of you that messaged, and I went and watched that match of the day. But it was totally bizarre. And you know what? It could have been 11 or 12. Aston Villa scored. Like, it was madness just to watch a team pick the champions apart like that. It was amazing. I don't know what you guys' thoughts were.
It was great. Yeah, I spent my whole afternoon on a couple of Saturdays ago watching these games, and I was just blown away. Picked a great day to just camp it out in front of the TV, and it was just like they got quite lucky from a couple of big deflections, in fairness, and that sort of sunk Liverpool. And what was it, 3-4-1 at one stage, and then you could see that Liverpool were going to really push for it, and they were going to push forward and try and get back into this game. But they sort of made the same mistake that Manchester United made all those seasons ago when they got trounced by Man City, that famous, was it 6-1 or 6-0 game, where they just tried to, I think 6-1, they just tried to get back into it, and they started flinging men forward. But then Aston Villa have the pace to get up the field, to get Grealish who can pick a pass, and that's what happened. They just started really going for it at 4-1 down, and they just were put to the sword. And it was really great to see a sort of a team who's come back up again after being relegated a few years ago, and they're sort of a smaller team, you would say, but they're just picking apart one of the best teams we've seen in English football for years. And it was definitely a breath of fresh air. And it was the last game on, wasn't it? It was a nighttime kickoff, and it was a great end to the day. My mouth was hanging open watching it. It was great.
Yeah, well, it was a pretty ridiculous game. I mean, you never see a team score 7, let alone against last season runaway champions. But I think I quite like the way they played against Liverpool. It was almost similar to maybe how Leeds played, in a way that the smaller teams, instead of just sitting back like they normally do and invite pressure, you kind of got to press the better teams, because they don't like it when you press them and go at them, because they just expect to have the ball for about like 60% possession of the game, and they just pass it around and do what they want. They don't like getting pressurised in these situations, and often the way that Liverpool play, like from the back, you can cause mistakes from happening when you put them under pressure, and it can lead to a goal. I mean, Chris, you wouldn't expect it to lead to 7 goals, but you can nick a game when you actually say, right, let's do it, let's go after these teams. And that's why Leeds have been so impressive for me. Like, they've just said essentially, fuck it, let's have a go here, and they do well.
I think as well about Liverpool, and you mentioned how nice it was to see Aston Villa go at them. I think specifically that teams that do that, they sit back, and Liverpool, they try and soak up the pressure. Arsenal did it at the end of September, and it was kind of looking like it might work for a while. I think Arsenal went 1-0 up actually, and then just couldn't do it anymore. And you just started the show eventually. Liverpool dominated that match in terms of possession and shots, and ended on to go on to win the game 3-1 in the end. So yeah, it was great to see. I think you have to say Aston Villa were a little bit maybe more you'd say Liverpool were more unlucky at times just with the nature of some of the goals. But Ollie Watkins, you have to say made a player of Van Dijk's quality just look really average. He gave him a nightmare.
Like Conrad Ballatoni.
Looked like Conrad Ballatoni indeed, one of the members of the Next to the Wall.
I was actually meant to say Danny Devine, but I like Conrad Ballatoni.
So that was one of the crazy games that weekend. We also had the Man United Tottenham match as well. Did either of you or both of you watch that game?
Very, very satisfying game of football. Very satisfying, leading to Man United fans going into meltdown, which is always pleasing. But yeah, again, that was just crazy. Especially the penalty first off for Man United, you just expect them just maybe 1-0, 2-0 win from there. But then Tottenham running down the other end scoring. But then Harry Maguire, he was holding off Luke Shaw from kicking the ball for that first goal, and just Man United looked like they were going to concede from every attack. They just looked all to hell, and it kind of just forced them to go berserk on deadline day and just panic buy. I mean, I've lost track of who they've even signed because of that, but they've signed a load of players, and I mean, I don't know if they'll be any good, but they definitely did need additions, and it was kind of highlighted from that. I mean, they've always been pressuring that Ed Woodward, and Solskjaer has not really stood up to him like what Jersey and I think Van Gaal did. So it'd be interesting to see what happens.
I worry that Solskjaer he's going to get the boot. It really wouldn't surprise me. But that match was mental, and you're right, because they could have. What was it at halftime? Was it 3-4-1 or something? I mean, it was mad, and I think, like you say, the red card was okay. It was strange.
It was a bit pathetic from Lamella. I mean, he could have got sent off as well,
if Martial was going to get sent off, then they should have both been sent off.
They
both
that will lead us on. I mean, there have been some very suspect decisions, not necessarily, maybe more in terms of the handball and the VAR and stuff, but that one with Martial and Lamella was soft, you'd have to say, but Spurs just looked too good at times. Like, Son is so quick, and the way him and Kane link up, and whenever Aurier's banging them in, that you've got a problem. Wasn't great for Man United, and I mean, you just would hate to play in their back four at the minute because it just doesn't seem to work.
I mean, I think Maguire seems really uncomfortable at the minute. He's not had a good start to the season whatsoever, and just seems to be at fault near in every game at the minute. And then with the added pressure of getting Martial sent off midway through the first half, I mean, when you have got players like you said, Michael, especially Son and Kane, you can be picked apart. And I found it quite funny when I was watching it, because you could see Jose Mourinho. He wasn't running up and down the touchline like he's done in seasons gone by. He was just sitting there in the stand or just watching. He was so smug. He was just a small sort of grin on his face, and he was just loving it, taking it all in. And yeah, it was great to see. It was a humiliating defeat for Man United, and one that I wouldn't have been surprised if Solskjaer had maybe got the boot after it. Certainly, the camera panned into I cannot remember the Man United owner's name, but panned into him on his phone near the end. So I wondered who he was phoning and what he was saying. Perhaps it was him setting up those panic buys, Andrew. But it was a really good day of football. I really enjoyed it. And I say giant killing, but Tottenham are a big side, but giant killing at its finest.
I think the only thing that could have been worse for Man United, or the only saving grace, in fact, was that there were no fans in the stadium to watch that. Just painful for Man United fans. So we talked about that red card, and you have to say it isn't a great decision. You feel if you're going to send one of them off, you send off both of them. But there have been worse decisions than that in the Premier League over the past month or so, and most of them stemming from some of the bizarre handball VAR decisions that we've seen. We've had Jimmy Carragher saying that they're ruining football. Was it Steve Bruce saying that we've lost the plot with some of the decisions? What are your guys' takes on it?
I think it's ridiculous how harsh it's been. And when we were supposed to record this podcast last week, and I had written out pages of notes on this about quotes of different players and managers, but I've gone and lost that book, so I'm just gonna have to do it off the top of my head. But it's seeing like when the defenders sort of shadowing the player, and you have to have a low centre of gravity, be crouched down. You can't have your hands pinned against your body, and it's as if that's what the referee and the governing body are expecting them to do now. It's just bizarre. You can't seem to have your arms even slightly out from your waist, which is impossible. And also when you're jumping, you can't jump and get any decent height when you're a centre half to clear a ball if you're not got your arms at least slightly out. I mean, that for me that's natural. So I don't understand it. And to bring it up to Scotland, it happened as well. It's been controversial up here as well. Rangers beat Motherwell a couple of weekends ago as well. I think it was with 5-1. Rangers did run absolute riot over Motherwell, and it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game. But Rangers got 2 penalties. I reckon one of them was dubious, another one was not a penalty at all, and it was again for handballs, both of them. So as I say again, it wouldn't have impacted the game because Motherwell were horrific and Rangers were clearly dominant. But it's just at the same time, it's not really on, and I have to say I don't really agree with how it's been implemented, and I think it should be slackened. And I think the game was going fine without the harsher rules which have been implemented. I'm really against it.
They did try they have tried to make them less harsh. I'm pretty sure. Did they not do that on the last Premier League weekend? I think they did kind of relax the rules slightly, but that whole weekend where I think you had that Newcastle Tottenham game, you had Brighton Man United, I'm pretty sure Crystal Palace and Everton had one as well, and there were all just ones where players were like jumping in the air and it was hitting off their arms. It's just stupid. I mean, it isn't VAR's fault because they're just following the laws of the game, but it kind of goes back to VAR because they're constantly checking it. So like up until now we've had a ridiculous amount of penalties because they're constantly checking it. And it goes back to what we've discussed a few episodes ago, so whether or not you would prefer then to go back on just individual error, not bother with VAR checking it, wasting so much time, and just go back to exactly, and just go back to human error, kind of like it was. It did make it more exciting. It was frustrating if it went against you when it was like a blatant offside that the linesman missed, but you could kind of accept it now. But now it's just bringing in more debate, which is kind of frustrating.
And they're still making mistakes with VAR, even again, not even the handball sort of stuff. Like the VAR, they should have picked up that it shouldn't just have been Martial that was sent off. Both of them were at it. It was at Lamela as well. So it's just frustrating to see that spending all this money on state-of-the-art technology and having referees sitting watching on a TV screen somewhere and not picking up blatantly obvious problems that have happened within the game and bring it to the referee's attention. It's mind-blowing for me.
I think the annoying thing for me is just why they feel the need to constantly change the game. Like stupid rules. I seen something the other day that they were debating taking like a free kick kind of thing for a throw-in for next season. But it's even like that when they brought in the one player kick-off. Like, did they need to change it from 2 people? It just pointless stuff. And like from the goal kicks now where you can pass to someone inside the box, you don't need to do things like that. I just don't understand why they feel the need to constantly change the rules.
I completely agree with what you said there. Yeah, I don't see. People love it for what it is. Why keep changing it? Especially if it's not making it better, like VAR. I don't think at the minute it is. We were saying before in the summer there that hopefully they were going to get over the teething problems they had last season, but it just doesn't seem like they are, and it's getting really frustrating to watch. But I don't know if we want to wrap things up and go on to the go on to the reserves.
We've kind of moved on a bit from international football, but it's all right.
Yeah, so we'll do our reserves piece then. So just to remind you, or maybe you don't know, we each make a case for a player who we believe has been particularly poor either on or off the pitch, and then we'll vote to send one of those players to our illustrious reserves bench. So, Andrew, it's usually you. Why don't you kick things off?
Well, I'll just give a little bit of context as to mine. Last week I did a fair bit of research on the handball, as that's what it was going to be about, but we didn't get to record in the end. So I just decided I would just pick a reserves player and just didn't need to put that much information about, didn't need an explanation. I would just say the name and that's all that would be needed. So this week I'm nominating Adam Johnson, and I think you all know why. That's all I need to say.
I mean, it's as big a cop out as I've ever seen, but I don't think there's much I can say on any player really that'll sway our final decision here. But I can at least give it a go, because I've stuck with sort of the international theme for my nomination and keeping it within Scotland as well. I've gone for the former Scotland manager, Bertie Vogts, the German man who didn't have at all any success really, or any success at all with Scotland. He was manager back at the start of the 2000s and was manager for about 2.5-3 years. And really, we had an absolutely torrid time with him as manager. And it seems that these days we've kept Scottish ever since, as in we don't want to look elsewhere for a manager after they've had the poor performance and they get sacked, and we just look for within our own crop. And some people say that's the way to do it. Other people will say that foreign managers have sort of different ideas, and it'd be nice to bring a fresh face into the Scottish sort of management. But this is, I think, Bertie Vogts is where people are put off, because he had that terrible a spell. I mean, I was looking at it earlier on, and I was only very young when he was in charge, but I still remember the talk about it on TV and everything when watching the games. And I think I was at a couple of the games that he was manager of back when I was about 7 years old, where the play that we had was horrific. It's attacking, defending. I mean, and at the same time, we didn't even have that bad players. I mean, we had seasoned professionals like Davy Weir, Barry Ferguson, Paul Dickoff, Rab Douglas in goals. So I mean, it was just terrible management. And he only won 8 out of his 31 games in charge, and again didn't qualify us for any major tournament. And one of the things that I found most staggering, and when I was doing my research into this, was a quote from, or a wee passage from Gary O'Connor, who's no saint himself, and I'm sure he'd admit that, and he's has troubles throughout his career. But when he was on international duty, I think back in 2003-04, he was given a chance by Bertie Vogts, and they were sitting there, and Bertie Vogts used to actively encourage drinking the night before an international game, which they're saying, I suppose that's maybe a bit of the old German mentality. They like having a few pints, but he was really encouraging having a few whiskies or 3, 4, 5 pints the night before a game to ease your nerves. And I just find that mental in this day and age. Like, you'd get absolutely hammered. Well, hammered effectively after the fourth or fifth pint, I suppose. But generally, you'd go into the next game the next day sluggish. You'd imagine you'd get hammered in the press. You'd never have that in this day and age. And that's one of the really strange things that I picked up on. But now I'd like to go back to the results. And I mean, when you go 2-0 down to the Faroe Islands, you know there's something absolutely horrific going on. I mean, what their population is under 60,000, I think. So I mean, Faroese football. I mean, again, I don't mean to come for them and sort of disrespect them. I'm sure they have some good clubs up there and good footballers. But when Lambert scored to make it 2-1 and Barry Ferguson had to score a late equaliser, that it's not really acceptable when you think of the names that I've mentioned before that were on the pitch that day. And it doesn't just go with that. We lost 4-1 to South Korea, 2-0 to South Africa, 1-0 to Lithuania, thumped 4-0 from Wales, lost 2-1 to Romania, 3-0 to Hungary, and I think the straw that broke the camel's back was the 1-1 draw with Moldova. And these aren't, I've listed a host of names there they're not footballing giants, these countries. and yet we're getting humiliated almost monthly by them when he was in charge. So, yeah, for a patriotic nomination this week, I've gone for the torrid time that Bertie Vogts had in charge of the national squad, and he's my nomination for this week. I'm not going to get Bertie Vogts in ahead of Adam Johnston, but I wish I'd saved this for another week. I wish I'd known who you were going to say, and I would have saved this. But no, Bertie Vogts for me, and let's hear yours, Michael.
Yes, so this week I was kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel here. It wasn't really anyone that kind of was jumping out at me, but this is a player who I've never really liked. He started his career at Norwich City, 96. Hung up his boots, most recently playing for Cardiff City. And in the middle, he was at Blackburn, Liverpool, West Ham. Anyone know who I'm talking about?
I'm scratching my head. Any more? Give us even more about him.
He also played for Man City. Had another spell at Liverpool. He did a couple of spells. Oh, and he was at Newcastle as well.
Oh, but Craig Bellamy.
Bellamy.
It is indeed Craig Bellamy. He was on loan at Celtic as well. Maybe if you put that in there, Jamie, you probably would have got it. Yes, it is Craig Bellamy, and it's specifically for one story which I didn't actually know about, but I've since read, and it involved the one and only John Arne Riise. Do you know what I'm talking about yet?
I don't think I do.
No.
Well, this is a bit of a corker. So it goes back to 2007. It was ahead of the Champions League tie with Barcelona, and Liverpool had gone to the Algarve for what was meant to be a relaxing team building trip, and this ended up with Bellamy threatening his teammate with a golf club after a dispute on a night out. Interesting enough, both of the two men that I'm talking about actually scored for Liverpool in the match at the Camp Nou when they reached the Champions League final that season. But it's this kind of main hotel disputes that is associated with both the players from that year. According to John Arne Riise, and it's been in his book, he claimed that on a night out, Bellamy was up on the karaoke machine and called for Riise to sing. Riise was refusing, saying, "I'm not singing, shut the F up or I'm going to come over and smash you." And then Bellamy replied, "Shut up, I'm going to effing kill you, you ginger cunt." We can bleep out these words. So anyway, they exchanged some...
I'm a fan how you decided to not say effing, but then you dropped the C-bomb on us.
Well, anyway, the important bit is that Riise goes back to his hotel room, gets into bed, and stupidly he didn't lock his door, which you'd think you would have done after you had an altercation with Bellamy, but it was he assumed it was Daniel Agger who came into the room. It was, however, Bellamy who had entered, and it just seems to have erupted into chaos. I think Steve Finnan was there as well, and he just kind of stood there and watched, but Bellamy came in with the golf club and just started swinging at Riise. Apparently he was aiming for his shins, which Riise said would have ended his career, but he managed to pull his legs away. I'll just give you the quote here from Riise. "I jumped out of bed, pulled off the sheet, and I held it between us like I was some kind of half-awake matador. Bellamy sputtered, 'Nobody disrespects me like that in front of the lads.' He was completely gone." So apparently the shot they did connect with smashed Riise on his hip. And at the time he says he didn't feel the pain, but he did soon after, and it hit him really hard with an iron, with a golf club. So, I mean, I just was I'd never heard that this happened. It's in Riise's book, and Bellamy has since apologized. He said it was pathetic, it was stupidity, drunken bullying. And I think Bellamy really, even apart from this, he wasn't the most popular of footballers. Who was it? Bobby Robson said he was the gobbiest footballer he'd ever met. And he does seem to have kind of been hated by different clubs over the years. Pretty decent career, you'd have to say. He's played nearly 80 times for Wales as well. But that story I just couldn't believe. Taking a golf club to one of your teammates is pretty special. So one of those crazy stories. And yeah, that's why I'm nominating Bellamy. But I think similarly to you, Jamie, and I don't think I could have nominated 15 players here, and I don't think they're going to get in.
Well, yeah, I'll just come out and say it now that I'm voting for Adam Johnson to be sent straight to the reserves, to the lowest depths of the reserves, and to remain there for eternity.
Well, I'm going to vote for Craig Bellamy. I just remember Craig Bellamy being an arsehole.
Adam Johnson. I almost feel sorry for the other people on the reserves bench now. It's not really fair, is it?
We can leave him in the changing room. But yeah, I think this brings us nicely on to the lockdown accumulator.
Yeah, which I mean, every time we think it's no longer going to be called the lockdown ACCA, it kind of looks like it could be that way for a while longer. But yeah, who are our teams, or which leagues are we betting on this week, Andrew?
Yeah, the English Premier League, the English Championship, the Scottish Premier League, and the Scottish Championship.
Oh, that keeps things fairly simple then. And Andrew, why don't you kick things off with your selections?
I got a bit excited when I first looked at the Premier League and seen the prices. So I've got Arsenal to beat Man City at 6-1. And I don't know, I felt something when I seen it. And then in the Championship, I have Norwich to beat Rotherham at evens, which I thought was a very tasty price. In the Scottish Premier League, I have Hibs to beat Ross County. I'm sticking with my main man, Jack Ross. And then in the Scottish Championship, I have Inverness to beat Dunfermline. And the £5 gets you £334.95.
I think the Dunfermline will scupper you. They've been good sort of pre-season and in the League Cup. They've been quite impressive.
I wouldn't be surprised if Man City also beat Arsenal, but
you know what? I fancy Mikel Arteta, and actually, it's just reminded me you said Arsenal. Arsene Wenger's on Graham Norton next week.
Oh, good. That's a strange guess.
It is,
isn't it? Just.
Does he have a book out or something? No.
I just don't know. Graham Norton's maybe an Arsenal fan.
Is he in a movie?
Has he released an album?
Jamie, give us your winning selections.
Yeah, I think for people who tune into the show, probably see over the last few weeks and months, I usually tend to play it a little bit safe, and it doesn't really get me anywhere anyway with my selections. I don't bet that often, but with lockdown ACCA, I've just been so poor. But I've decided to go a bit more extravagant this weekend, and I've gone for Newcastle to beat Manchester United at 4-1. Just with the way that Manchester United are playing at the minute, I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle, they'll beat them, and that could be the end of Solskjaer. So that's my first one. Wickham have had a very poor start to the Championship season, and I expect Millwall to beat them. So I'm going for an away win from Millwall at 4-5. St Mirren as well. Partick Thistle played them the other night, and although we got beat, St Mirren didn't look great shakes, and they also drew 2-2 with Queen of the South a few days later. So I imagine Motherwell will have enough to see off them. So Motherwell to have an away win at St Mirren. And I'm breaking the rules a wee bit here. I'm not going for the Scottish Championship. I'll just dive down to my own club and league, Scottish League One, and I'm going for Partick Thistle to beat old rivals Clyde. So a £5 gets me back £207.55.
Bit of a maverick, tearing up the rule book, picking your own leagues.
We all wanted to pick our own leagues. Christ, I'd have 8 winners by now.
It's the first day back in about 7 months of the league. I'm just gonna. That's my reasoning.
Well, I'll bring some normality back, and I'll play by the rules. I'm gonna in the Premier League. I'm gonna go with a draw. I don't usually back draws.
God. A draw.
Boring.
But Everton and Liverpool, I fancy a draw at 3-1. I think that's the value in the match. I think Everton have every chance of getting a result at home to their rivals. In the Championship in England, I've gone for Stoke away to Luton Town. I've also gone with Motherwell in the SPL away to St Mirren. It's the Old Firm this weekend, isn't it, as well?
Oh, yeah.
Looking forward to that. And in the Scottish Championship, I have gone with Wraith at home to Arbroath. And a £5 on those gets me £270.10, which would be nice.
Very nice.
So that's all for this week on the Backs to the Wall podcast. We hope you've enjoyed listening, and we'll be back, of course, very soon with a brand new episode. Until then, do make sure you tune into the Graham Norton Show on Friday night to see Arsene Wenger and Samuel L. Jackson. So until next time, please do like and subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, driver.